Hi, AugMentors. I'm Julie,
And I'm Jimmy.
and we know that great leaders have great mentors. Today, we are joined by Tom Preston, founder of Preston Associates, a global executive coaching firm.
Tom really got our brains into high gear with some tried and true, easy steps for you to take to create mental frameworks to help you connect more authentically with others and grow to your potential. The connection piece that Tom brought seems so basic, but it's huge. I'm going to quote Tom here because he tells us in this discussion that the smartest people in the world ask for help. To grow better to your potential, listen to this entire episode and you're going to hear about the power of the Nirvana letter. I'm not talking about a 90s grunge band. No, I'm talking about where do you want to be in your life. And this entire AugMentors episode is based around the principle of resilience and how a strong mentor tree in your life will help you remain powerful throughout your business and personal life. Here comes Tom.
Tom Preston, we are so happy to have you here on AugMentors today. How are you doing?
I'm good, and thank you very much for having me, Julie. Thank you, Jimmy, to both of you.
Tom, you've done so many amazing things in your career. You have lived all over the world. You have worked in all different kinds of industries. And today you are the founder and the president of Preston Associates, which is a global executive coaching firm. And we are so excited to talk to you today for so many reasons. But one is you have this incredible deep expertise in executive coaching. And that is a topic that comes up very often on AugMentors because we talk a lot about mentoring and how people can be better mentors. But then the topic of coaching often comes up. So I feel like our very first question for you, which I know is a burning question for both Jimmy and I, is can you tell us the difference between mentoring and executive coaching?
Sure. I mean, the first thing to say is that they often overlap. And I think that a great mentor should be able to be a great coach. And on occasion, a great coach should be able to be a great mentor. But they are, by definition, actually quite different in the sense that mentors tend to work with professionals to share their experiences. So if they've run a factory, for example, they're saying, well, when I ran my factory, this is how I got the maximum number of widgets off that production line. Whereas a coach is not giving the answer to the client. The coach is really exploring with the client what options are available, what choices might work to get what the client wants. But the reality is that, very senior, very time poor senior executives actually want a bit of both normally. And that's heresy to say that to HR. They would be absolutely horrified to hear that. But I think there's an element of truth to it. And so in our firm, for example, we have only executive coaches who themselves have been leaders, who themselves have owned P&L, who've managed balance sheets, who've managed teams of people to targets. Because actually, our clients at the level that we work do want a bit of both. But technically, they are different. One is to share experiences. The other is to help a client find the answers that they want to find to the questions they have.
And Tom, has that changed over time, the difference between coaching and mentoring, or maybe how the executives request assistance? Does it kind of like err more towards coaching or in mentoring as you run your business?
I think they're getting a bit closer in general because, again, coaching wasn't that well understood. When I set up this firm 21 years ago, everyone was like, oh, it's a fad. It'll be gone in 2 weeks' time.
Coaching?
Yeah.
And, really?
And if you can't teach, that all of that stuff 20 years ago, that was what we heard, right? Today, it's a completely different thing. The smartest people in the world ask for help. They just do.
Tom, say that again.
The smartest people in the world ask for help.
It's so,
Tom,
yes.
You see, Jimmy, you're proving my point. And whether that's asking for help from a coach or whether that's asking for help from a mentor, Many executives have both.
I love that. I love that. And I think that idea has really shifted, right? Because I think for a long time it was this idea of like you're a self-starter, you have to know everything, you have to do everything, you have to push. And I think that idea of having these almost like a committee, right? A group of, we kind of call it a tribe of mentors, like having a group of people who are able to provide that input to an executive that allows them to see themselves from different sides and then potentially, kind of bring it together and feel confident in the way that they move forward. How would you say that in terms of mentoring from the coaching standpoint, do you find that certain clients want more of that like hands-on experience and some want more of that deep reflection maybe that comes from coaching?
Yes, some want more of one or the other, and some don't know what they need, right? So sometimes you have to be super flexible because you think that the brief is for one thing. You think it might be more around kind of how do I become a better leader and engage my people, when the real thing is how do I come to terms with my father's death and the fact that I never got his approbation, because that is actually what is motivating and driving me, not always in a good way, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't figure that out until you're deep in a conversation with somebody. And sometimes they can't figure it out for themselves. I mean, whether you are a coach or a mentor, you are a thinking partner, right? And I think the important piece is not only that we are thinking partners, but we're objective thinking partners. If my best friend comes to me and says, I've got this problem, how do you think I should think about it? My default position is, you're my best friend, you must be right, the other person must be wrong. Because otherwise, why would we be friends, right? And if it's your partner or your mother or your father, that's even more entrenched, right? So the point is that whether you're a mentor or a coach or some kind of combination of those two things, you are a paid thinking partner who is completely objective and who has to have the necessary skills and qualifications to do those things properly. I think one of the issues around both mentoring and coaching is that people go, well, I can do that, but they're not properly trained. They haven't thought through what it really means. And those people, frankly, are downright dangerous.
Can you tell then when a client has maybe developed poor skills themselves around mentoring or coaching their team, and that when you begin to work with them, you find that you almost have to like rewire the conversations to become that like objective, thinking associate?
Always, in the sense that there are some things that we do really well, naturally, and there are some things that are default behaviors that we're not even aware that we're doing, right? And what we're trying to help our clients do is to be able to be conscious about how they show up as a leader, to have a big menu of things they can do as a leader and a coach to help their people, to help gather people around collective success, to help them build trust, to have courageous conversations together, to make the difficult decisions. And, being monochromatic doesn't work. If you only have one way of doing it only works part of the time. So the point is you have to have that flexibility. You have to develop a suite of frameworks and tools and ways of thinking and ways even of communicating so that you can engage an ever broader church, right? We have more and more diversity. We have more and more need to include different types of people, and they all need different ways often of getting to their souls. So, yeah, I think it's always the case, Jimmy, that there is always an element of rewiring or at least rethinking how I deliver my default best self.
And it just feels like, to your point, Tom, it just gets more and more over time. As you said, there's more and more people coming into the workplace from diverse experiences, but I think people are much more in touch. And Jimmy and I actually were recently just talking about this. People are more in touch and more willing to talk about past experiences, past traumas, past things that have happened to them in a work setting than they have it previously. Or at least that's our impression. Would you say that is something that you're seeing more of?
I think that's true because of authenticity. So we know that the way that we are created is in terms of our characteristics and all of our beliefs, our empowering beliefs, our enabling beliefs, and our limiting beliefs are all about our history and the way that we grew up and what happened in our house and what happened at school. Largely, those things are created by puberty, right? However, it is absolutely critical that if people are going to talk about those things, that they do so in a psychologically safe environment, and that they have complete choice about how much they share. Because what you don't want is, somebody taking a big risk on something that they maybe have never told another human being in their lives, and they walk out and go, I wish I'd never done that. So people are more willing to talk about it. It is around that authenticity piece, but it must be done in a good way. I think I would caution anybody to think, oh, let me, rush into my team now and ask them their deepest, darkest secrets because it's going to bond us and make us better. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it.
Tom, was there a specific either news story or time in the last 20 years when you felt like the authenticity switch was flipped? Because, I know when I was starting my career right around the Great Recession in the United States, a couple of years before that, there was no sharing of this. I was still being regularly just upbraided by my boss, just for shits and giggles, more or less. He would just come yell at me for making him money. And but now I feel like there's no way that would happen. And instead, there would be there'd be a whole lot more sharing if I was 24 nowadays. Was there something that changed that, you think?
Well, I don't think it's a single thing, Jimmy. I think it's the progression it's an evolution, in fact, of what people need from leaders, what work environments are expected to deliver on, what people want for themselves, and the connection that they create with others. For many, many people, it is still true that the workplace can be a scary place. I mean, let's not think that it's Nirvana out there, because it definitely isn't. But it is getting better, and people are getting more thoughtful and more open. I was actually talking to a client last week, wonderful woman, brought up in quite difficult circumstances. And because of the difficulty of the circumstances within which she was brought up, she has always found it very difficult to talk about her authentic self. So one of her sort of protection mechanisms is to hide behind her very carefully curated mask. But it's starting not to work. And so I took her through her telling me her life story, all of the difficult things that had happened, very difficult watching her parents' relationship, for example. I mean, obviously from a confidentiality point, I'm not going to go into any great detail. And she just found it so liberating to be able to, in a safe place, talk about these things and talk about how, as a senior, very senior woman, leader, that actually she had this absolute epiphany that it was time that she was her full self with her new team. She was moving jobs, and that this was an opportunity for her to take her mask off, throw it on the ground and say, hi, this is me. Now, she's not sharing, I would say some of the gory detail, but she's editing, and to the degree that she is comfortable to share the things that she can share. And it will be the first time in her life. I then, and she practiced how she was going to tell these stories and, what bits of the story she wanted to tell and how she was going to deliver that in a really authentic and humble and genuinely warm way. And then I got a call from her chief of staff 2 days later saying, hey, this thing that you've done with my boss, we want to do it as the leadership team, her new leadership team. Can you come in and start team coaching with us, starting with what we call the leadership tree, which is looking at your roots and how your beliefs got formed and what your coping mechanisms might be and your strengths, and then what happens when you have all those wonderful strengths, but what happens in this team if you overuse them? And what are your dreams and your support systems? And so this wonderful way of talking about yourself, but in a safe way. And we actually get them to draw the tree, and then they present back the tree. And so for somebody who's never done this, never had the courage to do it, never had the permission to do it, never felt confident enough to do it, it's a magical moment, you know? So it's not a single thing. It's an evolution. And forget not, you know, today also, leaders are leading 5 different generations at the same time.
Yeah.
And just how different those generations are, and what they think of as is quote unquote normal. Because what's normal for, you know, one generation is totally abnormal for the other, right? So
my husband,
you're saying, yeah, landlines versus TikTok.
Well, indeed, yes. Versus, you know, SpaceX or whatever. I mean, yeah.
So Tom, one reason I love that story is that it was a great example of how exceptional you are at upselling your clients to go from just one leader to then the entire team. So kudos to you.
One thing that you need to know about me, Jimmy, is I've never sold anything in my entire life, but I'm very happy to talk to a willing buyer.
I am totally stealing that, Tom. Thank you.
I think we're going to see through that for you, Julie. We're going to know.
Tom, oh my gosh, that was such a great story. I have a question that keeps coming into my mind, and it touches on a few things that you've already shared about how, like, if you are out of your depth, flag it, right? And I think as mentors, mentors often 9 times out of 10 are not executive coaches, have not been trained in asking those kind of questions, have not been trained in, as you said, a lot of the frameworks and the rubrics and ways. What would be some language a mentor could use if, let's say, they're in the workplace? I'm just making a stereotypical situation. A much younger employee comes in, shares something very vulnerably that doesn't feel like the mentor kind of knows what to do. Like, what kind of language would you suggest, even within the workplace or even outside of the workplace, they use to kind of flag that, like, this, you know, they're turning into dangerous territory and they don't feel comfortable continuing the conversation?
I think, simply put, turn it into a question. Is that something that you would like to talk to somebody about? If you would like to talk to somebody about it, can I be of any help? Can I help you look at the people who might be able to help you around that topic? I'm flattered that you've come to tell me. Of course, I will keep this confidential, but I'm probably not the best qualified person to help you. But I'd really love to find you somebody who could be really helpful to you, and that would be my commitment to you. I think it's something along those lines. Because if you don't try and rescue people if you don't know how, right?
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, mentor-mentee relationships evolve in all kinds of ways. So you can start off with a very professional, and then, you know, suddenly it maybe evolves into something more than a mentor can handle. So I love that. Can you talk a little bit about asking questions, or sort of that framework? Is that generally how conversations, well, maybe a podcast interview is uncomfortable because we keep asking you questions, but you're not asking us questions. I mean, you're welcome to ask us questions, but
well, I'm
tell us a little bit about that.
I'm doing my best to give you some synapses on thoughts that they may not be posed as questions, because as your guest, I guess I am here to answer your questions, but I'm working away in the background on your subconscious. Trust me.
You can ask us questions, Tom. You just might not like what we share.
So questions. I think the art to questions is, what are you trying to achieve? I think that we all need to know the what before we start anything. So am I trying to help you get clarity? Am I just simply supporting you? Am I trying to help you move to action? What am I doing? That would be one thing. The second thing I would say is that words matter. So, for example, in our organization, we talk a lot about asking people for help, because very often people think that when they have to ask somebody for help, that it makes them vulnerable, it makes them uncomfortable, it makes them feel like they should have the answer and that they'll be judged for not having the answer, and so forth. And then when we say to people, okay, but how do you feel when somebody comes to you to ask for your help to think something through. So they're not asking to borrow money. They're not asking you to do their job for them, but they are coming to you for your help to think something through. And the response always comes back, well, I feel respected and trusted, and I feel like they think I'm an expert and that I can actually help them. And you realize that there's this really bad hardware. So when we do that, I have to be really careful to say to people, how do you think most people feel most of the time when they have to ask somebody for help? So I'm going to say that again. How do most people feel most of the time when they have to ask somebody for help? Because if I ask the wrong question, how do people feel when they have to ask for help? I'm going to get the wrong answer, which would be, well, I love asking people for help. Because that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me illustrate the point, right? So I think words and structures of questions really do matter because they get you to where you want to be, or they fail to do that. And as a coach, a coach is a vehicle that takes you from where you are to where you want to be. So the way that we think about and structure questions is absolutely critical.
I don't remember my basketball coach in high school asking me many questions. It was more commands. So I was just kind of thinking through how does that change? And this might be kind of switching gears and I might be getting off topic, but how does that change for the executive coaching and helping individuals versus when helping teams? Do you adjust your questions in that sense when it's a broader question rather than somebody, or when it's a broader group as opposed to an individual? Because as I said, like some coaches don't ask a lot of questions but are still labeled coaches. And maybe that's not in this executive sense. Am I making?
I'm not sure that many coaches can be really good coaches if they don't ask questions, at least in the executive coaching space. And honestly, if your coach and if your basketball coach had come to you, Jimmy, and said, what do you think you most need to work on? Here's the feedback. Here's what I see happening on the court. I think your potential is to do this on the court. How could we bridge that gap, right? I mean, it's a combination, a sports coach is a combination of somebody who's building the confidence, digging out the potential, and saying, don't do that, do this. It is that sort of mixture between coach and mentor. But in terms of how questions are structured between teams and individuals, some are applicable to both and some aren't, right? I mean, this is the art of getting the right question at the right time that creates that aha moment that goes, wow. I mean, I was on a call today with somebody from one of the big consulting firms, and she was talking about a sort of, potential thinking about doing something different with her career and what have you. And we got into a conversation around whether she might take a corporate role, for example, or do more of a coaching type role. And she just didn't sound like she properly thought this through. And I said to her, you're nearly 50 years old. This is the last quarter of your career at this point. If you think now that we're all going to work till about 70, something like that, you've got another 20 years. And don't you think you should be really conscious of what do you want? And I generally don't quote the Spice Girls, but they did say what you
generally.
Jimmy actually does all the time. How did you know that? Oh my God.
Generally, I don't. But they did say, what do you want? What do you really, really, really want? And it's the best question in the world, right? Because it's on every level. It's on every plane. What do you want spiritually? What do you want your success to look like? What do you want your legacy to be like? What do you want your daily life to be like? What do you want your relationships to be like? What do you want to be famous for? And what makes a good death?
Ooh, wow.
Because that's where all of that culminates. So I just said to her, you need to go away and think what you really, really want, because these two things are so far apart. They deliver entirely different lives. They deliver entirely different outcomes, different, literally day by day difference. I don't think you're ready to make any decisions until you think, what do you want? It is life's most important question that we can actually answer, right? Why do we exist may be an important question to some people, but there's never going to be an answer. But what do I want, ... to achieve, feel, others to know, whatever want might be, we can answer if we soul search enough.
Any prompts for soul searching that our listeners can chew on?
Okay, this is weird. All right, we're going into you're gonna.
I mean, it can't be weirder than the Spice Girls.
Believe me, it can.
Great, we're here for it.
All right. So when I was training, when I was doing my postgraduate program as an executive coach, somebody told me about this amazing magical tool. So the amazing magical tool is called the Nirvana letter. And when you write a Nirvana letter, you put yourself at 20 years, for example, you could choose 10, 20 years in the future. So when I wrote mine, or 25 years, when I wrote mine in 2002, my Nirvana letter was dated 2037. And your Nirvana letter starts with, "Dear Julie, I am looking at the sunset in my garden, overlooking the beach in the olive grove." So you are physically at that point in the future. And you look back to the present day, and the instructions are, it's been your perfect life. But you can't use magic. So if you're not born in America, you can't become the president of the USA. You can, right? You cannot.
I don't know whose Nirvana dream that is.
Well, that's a whole different question. As an example, but you can't win the lottery. You can't say, "Oh, and 5 years ago I won the lottery," and that So within reason, you've had your perfect life. And when I wrote my letter, I started to talk about the legacy of the Preston Associates, my firm, and how the young people had taken over. And I talked about, this was before either of my parents died, I talked about how I had been there for my mother and for my father during their death. And actually, my mother died in my arms, and it's my greatest achievement in life. Wow. And I talked about how I built buildings in Shanghai and how I had this house in this very sunny place, and, just caring about homelessness and how it just shouldn't exist in rich societies, even if all those rich societies are on the edge of bankruptcy, but homelessness shouldn't have to exist, and what I'd done about it. Anyway, so this letter I wrote, dated 2037, there I was in my garden at whatever age I will be if I make it that far in 2037, and I look back and I laid out all of these things, and every single one of them have come true. And we're not yet in 2037, we're only 2023. So I think that once you decide what you want, once you can access your unconscious mind, because this writing of the Nirvana letter is an exercise in your imagination, which in other words is unlocking your subconscious and giving yourself permission to say, I've had my perfect life. Most of us are far too afraid to think about what our perfect life could look like. But if it's just some hokey letter I'm going to write and probably doesn't mean anything, but actually the impact that it's had on me and many, many, many other people in terms of identifying what we want, because your brain is this incredible machine. Once you say to it what's important. So when we were born, somebody probably smacked her ass, and in the process, we were told breathing is important, right? And we've never had to think about whether or not I should breathe again, right? So once something is important, the brain, once it knows it's important, it subconsciously starts to find ways to make that important thing happen. Whether that's scientifically true or not, time will tell. But it's certainly experientially true for me. And I do think that this question about what do you really, really, really want, we have to find answers to it, because this isn't the dress rehearsal. And I don't think anybody wants to wake up at 87 and go, oh no, I didn't, or I regret, or I wish, because at that point, there's little we can do about it. Today, we can.
I kind of want to take a little time and write. I might need to, duck out of the podcast for a minute. That's what physical place were you in when you wrote that? Like, how did you make yourself comfortable to unlock your imagination?
Actually, I did it in this very room.
With windows.
And I'll probably tell you the truth, I probably had a glass of wine.
All good.
But the real point is just letting it out of your soul, right? Don't edit yourself. Don't wonder whether you have permission to wish for the best things for you and for others. Don't think, oh, if I say that out loud, I'm going to jinx it. It's going to, don't let your superstition, just let it come out. If you never want to show your letter to anybody, another living soul, you don't have to. But what you learn from it coming out of your soul, out of your subconscious, about what's really important to you, for me, it was life-changing. And I often go back and I often reread the letter, going, how am I doing? And some of the detail is kind of interesting in the sense that when I wrote the letter, I pictured myself in a garden of a house in the south of France that I'd rented. And in the end, that's not the house that I have today that would be in my Nirvana letter. The house that I have today is somewhere completely different. But it's a house. It has a view of the sea. It's, there's enough similarity for it to be kind of, well, that's a tick.
But my question is, so what now? It's 2023. Your letter was for 2037. Do you update the letter? Do you feel like as of now you've completed what needs to be completed, or do you feel like there's more to add?
I haven't updated the letter because I think I did a pretty good one to start with.
That's a fair answer, Tom. That is a fair answer.
The letter that I wrote is I have a book. I don't think you can buy it in America, but you can get it on Amazon in the UK called Coach Yourself to Success. And the letter is in the book. So for anybody who wants to read the letter, see if you can find the book, because I think it's helpful actually not to read somebody else's letter because you want the same letter, but to kind of visualize what your own letter could look like. I think, just think about how we do these things. Think about what is next. I haven't edited my letter because I'm very busy living life. I'm traveling for fun and for doing new things. And, I feel like there's so much, life is such a big gift, right? And there's so much to do, and there's so much to learn, and there's so much to experience. But the important things were covered in my letter. So I don't think I need to rewrite it in that sense. I just need to stay true to what matters to me.
Tom, I want to talk about the tree, the leadership tree that you had brought up earlier. In a previous episode, actually earlier this month, we talked about a metaphor of the mentoring tree and sometimes the importance of not having your branches or, shade somebody else's success because certain mentors might choose to be quiet or silent or a shadow and not actually be shown as a mentor so that the mentee can fully own their success and grow. Can you talk a little bit more about the leadership tree and help our listeners understand not how to fully draw their own tree, but just how to maybe work through like the branches, the trunk, and the roots in some way?
So, as an executive coach, you're never allowed to talk about yourself with a client. So I would not really ever do this. So I'm going to take this opportunity because you've been kind enough to give me the platform to talk about me. Yay!
Yes,
is that okay?
We are here to talk about you.
Oh yeah,
that's what we're here for.
So when I do my own tree, the roots that were important to me, the experiences that kind of shaped who I am today, were a number of things. The first was my parents' sense of anything is possible. My dad was a doctor, my mum similar, and it was all about being in service to people. So they gave me a fundamental belief that my life's work is to be in service to other people. And they gave me a second one, which was life is pregnant with opportunity. Anything is possible. I grew up in Malta. I went to school in Canada. Then we moved to Hong Kong. You're like, just everything's so exciting. So I have this deep belief of everything is possible. And then my mother had quite a lot of money, which she promptly spent all of it. So we then ran out of money. So I have this kind of schizophrenia around caution and possibility. My sort of terror is that I'm going to die on a park bench penniless. right? So these are examples of my roots, right? So how do they go into my trunk? Well, this sense of optimism and anything is possible makes me a consummate optimist, which I think you have to be if you're going to be an entrepreneur. On a bad day, that kind of strength is super irritating to other people. You know, what is he smoking? Everything's always positive.
We can relate.
He doesn't want to deal with the bad news. Doesn't want to, he thinks he can solve every problem on the planet. It's right, super irritating. So I have to be aware that I have this kind of superpower, which is my optimism, and that it has a very dark side if I overuse it, especially to people who are introverted, especially to people who are fact-based. I'm an intuitive practitioner. I'm not, so that's as an example. The kind of terror of dying on a park bench and the world is full of opportunity means that I'm actually I'm a very conservative business person, even though I will invest and make things happen, but I really make sure that I think they're the right thing. That can make me, on a bad day, a little bit too conservative. Maybe I'd be able to help even more people than we do today as a firm if I wasn't quite as cautious. And I think, that the whole thing about the world being full of opportunity because my parents had to go live in different places, either because they wanted to, or then eventually my father actually had to earn some money, because we didn't have any. So, that's given me a lifelong absolute love of travel. Right. And so if somebody said, here's a job, you're going to be in this kind of this little cage and you're never going to be able to go anywhere or meet anybody or do anything. We just want you to sit in a dark room and code. That would be my worst nightmare. Right. So it's kind of, this is how you sort of learn about yourself. Right. That's the point of the tree. Does that answer your question or not really?
Yeah. How does that then go into, like, is it a full metaphor, I guess, or is it the roots in the trunk? Like, do you get into the tree? Do you get into, seasons? Like, how productive is that for you and or like clients?
Yeah, I mean, but I think once you get into the tree, you're thinking about what are the support systems that help me to succeed, and what are my dreams? What do I really, really, really want? And then you can see how all of that joins together. And that there's nothing wrong, for example, with saying, I want to run a really profitable business. Not everything has to be hugs and kisses to everybody. There's a reality out, right? We're not all businesses have to run successfully, and very often part of being successful is being profitable. So it's perfectly okay to say, one of my dreams is to run a profitable business. It doesn't have to always change the world about, and leave the world a better place necessarily. It's helpful if it can do both. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it does. It is quite holistic. It does join together.
Tom, before we get to rapid fire word association, Julie, do you have another question?
No, I just wanted to say, Tom, honestly, this is like these different frameworks are different ways to help others explore who they are and to be able to maybe share authentically who they are. So I think you shared with us so many great things. And I think what's really going to stick is definitely kind of that language around questions and ways that you can help others share more about themselves, identify if you aren't the right person for that. But I think some of these, the Nirvana letter and the tree, are just some really, really great ways to get to know yourself better and to get to know others better. I'm dying to talk. So Jimmy and I will have time to talk afterwards. I think definitely about this Nirvana letter is just all over my brain, especially today. So yeah, no, I really am just really appreciative of the perspective that you brought us today and our listeners. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real joy, both talking to you now, but also in the preparation. If anybody hasn't met Jimmy and Julie, they're awesome. You get to know them.
Keep going. Yeah.
Today is their birthday. Both of them have the same birthday.
Get out of here.
That's why it's the best day to write our Nirvana letters. Yay.
Happy birthday to both of you.
Thank you. Tom, I want to play this quick game with you right before we bounce. It's a rapid fire word association for 4 words.
Okay.
So when I say the word mentor, what do you think of?
Coach.
When I say the word mentee, what do you think of?
Coachee.
Oh, nice. How about sponsor?
Budget.
Ooh, we've never heard that one before, Tom.
Yeah, I like
Love
that.
that.
And then lastly, the word coach.
Vehicle that takes you from where you are to where you want to be.
Nice. Now, just for me and for fun, this is not standard, but in your specialist areas, when you talk about family business coaching, is that really just another way to say resilience and crisis coaching? Because it's just constantly in crisis and people need more resilience?
Absolutely not.
Damn it, Tom, you didn't get. I just wanted to make a bad joke.
Absolutely not. Because you know what? What a lot of people don't understand is the burden of wealth. For anybody who doesn't have money, it's the panacea to all ills. To those who have a lot of it, it comes with a huge amount of responsibility. So, sorry, Jimmy, I can't even make a joke out of it. Sorry.
That's a great answer. Huh. Tom, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Jimmy, what a phenomenal interview. I love Tom. I felt so inspired. What did you think?
I feel like he's listening to this on a boat in the Mediterranean.
And he didn't invite
Tom,
us.
call me.
We'll be right there. We'll be right there. We need a vacation.
Tom was amazing. I don't think we've had a guest yet that not only absorbed all of our long-winded questions, but also more or less responded with, yeah, that's cute. Good question. This is how you deal with it. And Tom was he was on it. He had such great points of view and, frameworks that felt classic immediately when he told me them. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. How many people have you already told about Nirvana letters, Julie?
I don't know how many I've already written. I actually, I just keep, writing them, just getting back to my 90s roots. But
somewhere
Tom's
Dave
a real
Grohl
deal.
is like, literally, leave me alone, lady.
I mean, hashtag Gen X, definitely, yes, born of the era. No, Tom is a real deal. I mean, Tom is definitely the real deal. And I feel so lucky. I feel like our listeners are so lucky that we got a lot of really valuable information that I'm sure he shares with a lot of his clients that are quite substantially a part of, that they're paying a lot. So we got a lot of great frameworks that our listeners can take and be able to use. And I think going to the first thing we were talking about, how Tom helps others connect more authentically with each other, is that the idea that the smartest people in the world ask for help. And he actually knows some of the smartest people in the world and coaches some of the smartest people in the world. And they all ask
Tom
for help.
is one of the smartest people in the world.
It's so hard to ask for help. I find it very hard.
I find it hard to ask for help because I feel so much context needs to be provided for a useful answer. And then I get to be thinking, oh, well, it's so hard to provide context. And I think, like most people, you got to realize, like, your stuff isn't that difficult. You just need to take a moment and a deep breath and say, okay, I have this very basic question. Whoever you're asking it isn't going to do it for you. So you still need to do the work, but you can still say, hey, I need a little bit of direction or some support. And I think that's the key piece. You're not asking for help and being like, will you do it for me? You're asking for help and I don't know what to do.
And the humility, which we talk a lot about, is like, I don't actually know all the answers, which is so much of why mentoring is so important, that you can ask people to be able to support you and help you. And they're going to share something with you that you wouldn't have even thought of. So the fact that he sees these top CEOs and the ones that are really successful are not the ones who know that they know everything. They know that they have to ask people for help.
It's so simple, but yet so challenging. And when you ask someone for help and they reply, they're all almost automatically emotionally invested in you succeeding in what they just asked you about. So you have made that person a mentor because they are now emotionally invested in your success. So it is this amazing, I wouldn't say trick, but sleight of phrase that allows you to connect with folks and they will genuinely care.
And they feel better about themselves. You're actually giving them a gift for the opportunity to be able to help you, which feels so counterintuitive. Like you're bothering somebody asking them for help, but at the same time, you are actually giving them a gift to be able to help you. So that was something I loved from Tom. But the thing we learned, Jimmy, that I had not actually heard in the context of mentoring and coaching is the idea of the Nirvana letter, which is basically sitting down and writing a letter to yourself X number of years in the future that is describing exactly where you are, exactly what your life looks like, what is happening around you. It kind of reminds me of Mike Fada's Best Day Ever a little bit, but it's a little bit more in actually setting the stage and imagining yourself there. And the fact that Tom had written this letter has all of those sort of characteristics there and is able to just appreciate that he has kind of gotten to this point, is able to have seen how his success has come to fruition. I love, love, love this idea. I haven't done it yet though. Did you do it?
I exercise my imagination all the time and unlock my self-conscious, but I have not wrote myself a Nirvana letter like this. I've only written Nirvana letters year to year. So this full future is a very different way to go about it for me. But unlocking the self-conscious, I feel, is just such a wonderful term. Not because this is science fiction, but you mentioned Mike Fada's Best Day Ever. This reminded me immediately of LeBron James, the king of basketball at the time. He likes to send out tweets or X's that are talking about how future LeBron would have coached past LeBron and how current LeBron would view the interaction. So it can be a little meta, but it's definitely an exercise of unlocking your self-conscious, which simply put, like, if you can't imagine yourself somewhere, how are you ever going to get there? Like, it's so simple. Like, the structure of it is so simple, yet it's a very complex and powerful tool that Tom gave to us.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I am definitely going to sit down and do it. I already have an idea of what that could look like. So, and also sharing your Nirvana letter potentially with a mentor, right? To kind of have somebody along the way, going back to the first point, somebody who could maybe help you get to where you want to go. And that helps set your vision. Very much of our principle, which I would say Tom's main principle is vision. I think he really helps with the Nirvana letter, setting that vision that we talk a lot about here at AugMentors. And for us, the vision is really focused on the vision for the mentoring relationship. But I think Tom really, he is the vision to me. I think I want my Nirvana letter to be Tom, which I don't think will actually happen. It'll be my own version of that.
I thought you were going to say, go to YouTube and check out Tom, the vision. We didn't quite get a full tour of his living room, but let me tell you about those windows. Let me tell you.
Jimmy and I are going to show up at his house and do a full tour of the windows and everything. But yeah, I think for me, his principle, I thought it was something else, but it really is vision. That's my feeling. What about you?
It's got to be, especially when I think about the idea of the mentor tree and how you don't necessarily have to tell people who you have been mentoring, and instead think about what kind of mentor network you want in your life to help you provide the greatest amount of diversity, support, intellect, and really power behind all of your decisions as a leader. Great leaders need to also be excellent at network creation. We're not using the terrible word networking. We're talking about how do you have folks that care about you, they're emotionally invested in your success from a whole range of backgrounds. And with a mentor tree, where you have all these branches that are folks that are coming to support you as a mentor, and then all these mentees, these are your roots that ground you, that also give you feedback. It can put you in a very powerful place as a leader because you don't make decisions alone. You don't make decisions in a silo, and you're able to go out and ask people without having to ask or pay for help. But people who want to see you succeed, you're able to say, hey, I need to bounce this off you. And that's a very powerful tool for leaders to have that mentor tree. But the only way to get there is you need to be able to see where your holes are in your network. For instance, like, I don't know anybody who's a trainer of dolphins. I've only watched Ace Ventura. So if I was going to have more time around animals, I would need to go out and find a veterinarian or other folks who spend more time with animals to be part of my network.
You could bring them to your warehouse.
We are near the National Aquarium in Baltimore. That's very true.
Absolutely. And over time, here we are, like, closing in on our 100th episode before we know it, that we have had to have a lot of mentors to help us to get to this point. So I think that is a great, great point, is making sure you're finding those people who are there to support you, really saying your vision with your Nirvana letter. And Tom was just brought so many good examples. I appreciated that he had a chance to talk about himself a bit. I know as a coach, you're not always able to share really specifics about yourself. So I'm glad that he was excited about that and felt comfortable.
Really powerful.
And
he shared some of those lines still stay in my head about that Nirvana letter he wrote to himself and how he fulfilled it.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great time with Tom. And we'll look forward to coming to Tom's apartment and having tea.
I think I'll just stay outside the window and like look in. I'll just wave. That's probably
Tom and I can have tea inside and wave to you.
Yeah, you can go inside. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. That was awesome.
Thank you, Tom.
AugMentors out.
Wow, you've made it this far, and we thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed our episode and discovered new ways to bring more authentic connection into your mentoring relationships. Want to tell them more, Jimmy?
Be an augmenter with us. Visit our website for the best interactive mentoring content at augmentors.us. Share our podcast with someone you care about. Like and subscribe. And yes, really, you following our show and writing a review, it's a big deal. Your actions provide us with the resources to continue our undefeated, unencumbered, prize-winning productions. We welcome questions and suggestions via email hi@augmentors.us or on social with our handle @augmentorshq. We are most active and available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Shout out and earnest thank you to our intrepid producer, Erlin Cato. We appreciate you. AugMentors out.
See ya.